Hello, beautiful people out there that listen to this podcast or watch the replays wherever that you can find this. We are currently streaming live, but obviously you will if you're not watching live. Hopefully you'll find this podcast in any form at your earliest convenience. I am back for episode 160. And it's funny because I haven't really been podcasting much this year. To be honest, I've talked about it earlier in the year in a couple updates on the podcast that I took some time off. Uh, I've been working on getting some guests on the podcast coming up, but I've been busy doing some other related things in my day job. So that's taken the majority of my energy, plus a lot of personal stuff I've been dealing with over the past year or so. Didn't feel really like podcasting. Wanted to kind of find some inspiration to come back, and well, I'm back. So hey there, welcome to 160, and thank you for listening. So for those that don't know, I actually started another podcast many years ago called Sports Chat Podcast, which came about because many years ago, even before I started this podcast, I had a TV show, on YouTube called sportschat.tv or sportschat TV, whatever you want to call it, where I talk to people within the sports industry as well as people who were fans like I was back in the day. And we had little great discussions about specific things in sports, certain sports that people may have not known about. All of that can be found on the YouTube channel in an archive playlist. But the reason I bring that up is that, I thought that I was going to begin podcasting under the Sports Chat Podcast name. But over the last 5 years, I've made 3 episodes, 2 of which I had a co-host, which was lovely, Ron Rinaldi. He was a friend, decided to come record a couple episodes with me, have some discussions. Those were great. But, things happen, schedules, life happens. And we didn't keep that going. And then I thought, well, maybe I would just do solo episodes or maybe find a guest co-host. And I just really didn't have the ambition to keep that podcast going. So it kind of sat there dormant. Well, officially, I have closed the book on that podcast. I'm not going to have that in the back of my mind and think that I need to, keep creating episodes and all the stress when this podcast is enough. And also I have other content that I create through the Love of Music Project, which was a blog, but I was going to move it to Twitch, and that's kind of been hard to kind of see what to do with that. But because I talk about music on this podcast, or really anything on this podcast, I can talk about sports. So you may start seeing me do kind of like a sports hot take, because even my love for sports has changed over the years. And also, it's really just, I'm into certain things differently nowadays. So that'll be coming on this podcast to kind of keep that every once in a while. And if you like sports, great. If you don't, maybe skip those episodes or that segment and move on about your day or evening or night whenever you listen to the podcast. But I just kind of wanted to update people on that and how it could incorporate it into the BB Media Industries brand that I've built over the years through these podcasts and projects that I do. So I just kind of wanted to update people who actually have been like, okay, well, what happened to your podcast? You talk about it. You talk about all the episodes, but you're not podcasting. Well, here's why. So thank you. I know there's one person actually currently watching this live. It won't matter to you when you listen or watch this later, but thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. So that's awesome. So another thing I wanted to come about, as you well know, that there's an official website for this podcast, shenanigans.bbpodcast.com. There you find all the social media, all the links to that, all the news and updates. If you haven't bookmarked it by now, I've mentioned it on pretty much every episode for a few years. Feel free to do so, or just Google this podcast, and then you can do that. But if you're listening or watching this later and you want to help assist it out, if you watch or listen, if you listen, let's just start with that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any platform where that you can leave like a rating and a comment, please do so. Even if it's like feedback for me, because the more of you to do that, the more the platforms will recognize people actually listen to this podcast, and therefore, it'll help me so much. So please just leave a favorable rating if you can, or it helps. And it also helps with, potential opportunities that may arise with this podcast, whether I am able to get more guests or just maybe the work that I've put into this podcast for almost a decade now will pay off in some sort. Because it's been a kind of struggle, to be honest, in my mental health state, to be like, is this fun anymore as a passion project, when a lot of people who actually do pay attention to this podcast, and I appreciate your support, are always like, why aren't you like all these other big podcasters in the world of podcasting now making a shit ton of money? A, let's go down the list. I'm not a celebrity. B, I don't already have money. I do have a day job. And C, again, this was originally a hobby of mine. So when it's not fun anymore, hence where my burnout came. So I'm just being completely transparent and honest, and that's how I am. So again, I appreciate all the support. If you're new to this podcast, or if you find this once it's uploaded or whatever, please tell a friend or subscribe or leave a comment, rating. Any of that support helps. And if you want to, on the main Anchor support page, actually support monthly, that'd be great. No obligations, but as a content creator in the sea of content creation these days, it's hard to be found as the needle in the haystack. So I want to put it out there that there's ways to support, and not just me. If you follow any other content creator, any other podcaster, do what you can to support them. It doesn't necessarily mean monetarily, although that's very much appreciated. It could just be sharing that you listen to the podcast on social media, or leaving that rating or comment. It goes a long way, and it doesn't put the effort in vain. It makes it seem like we're doing something that you agree with, or just helps us in general in terms of the way algorithms and the way technology moves on platforms and social media and the internet. You have to actually show engagement. So there's that. And if you're a person that thought that you follow or like this podcast on social media, please double check to see if maybe something didn't happen and you unfollowed the page or whatever it may be on all the social media. That would be helpful as well. Okay, enough of the housekeeping updates. Maybe I should just talk a little bit about what I've been up to, other than some stuff I can't talk about. It's a little personal, but as you well know, I follow electronic dance music. I've been going to a lot of shows. I've been to a lot of concerts this year. I think 2 episodes ago I talked about Coldplay and Claude Mannstroke. Well, that was in May. And since then, I've been to a lot of things. I've been to a music festival called Arc Music Festival year 2. Heard great things about it from year 1. Went this year. It's in Chicago, the birthplace of house music and techno. The lineup was stacked with amazing artists. The vibes were on point. I was very impressed by this festival. So I'll probably be going again next year. It's just a whole nother level. And the fact that it's during Labor Day weekend, that helped. I automatically had a day off the day job. So there's that. So great about that. I recently went to Duran Duran, Nile Rodgers, and Chic. That was an amazing concert. So what I'm getting at is, if you're into music or sports or whatever your hobby is, and I think what the pandemic taught me is that A, people aren't around forever, and B, go do it if you can. I mean, work and daily obligations will always be there, but special experiences, and that goes hand in hand, not just with, hobbies like I have of going to concerts or events. That goes with just like people in general. I mean, with the internet and everything, people are a little too engrossed in the technology and not engrossed in actually people as a whole anymore. Or it's very one-dimensional, especially if we're like myself and I do and have in the past watched a lot of content on all these streaming apps. I mean, I've done episodes on this podcast about, hey, this is what you should binge. Yeah, it's great. It's entertaining. But it's not like reality. And it's also just basically, distractions from human contact and interaction. And as a person that loves the psychological and social, behavioral and social science of just communication in general, because if you don't know, fun fact, that's what I got my degree in college. That's fascinating to me. But I also need to put I need to stand up and actually be the example and actually try to keep connections going. Anyway, it's nice to talk to people again. I mean, after the pandemic and after the lockdowns and everything that the world's been through, actually try to talk to family and friends or check up on that person you haven't talked to in a while. Not trying to be on some TED Talk about how to live. I'm just saying I've been doing a lot of my own internal searching. Helpful for my mental health, maybe not. I don't know. The jury's out on that one. But anyway, so I just wanted to come back on the podcast. The reason why another delay for this episode is that I was hoping to have a guest on this milestone episode of 160. I have some potential guests coming up, but because of, again, scheduling and people winding down their summers and events and obligations, it's been pushed back. But hopefully we'll keep this going with guests, no matter whether they're part of the music industry or not, or as you've seen, I've talked to people in health. I've talked to people in entrepreneurship on this podcast. If you don't know any of this, feel free to go back and listen to the episodes. If you're new, maybe an interview or a conversation that has been had on this podcast would be advantageous. So feel free to scroll through all of the episodes and check them out if you have the time. And again, for those who are unaware, this podcast is really the flagship podcast, as I talked about at the BB Podcast Network. To be honest, that network is probably going to shut down. And by network, I mean there was this podcast, and now that Sports Chat TV is gone. And then there was a couple podcasts from some friends that were creating podcasts about 5-6 years ago, maybe even longer. I don't know if they're creating content like they were. So I've been using that hashtag BB Podcast Network for maybe 8-9 years. I don't know. There's really no network. I'm not part of a network. I do this all on my own. I've taught myself how to podcast, how to website build. Another thing is by trade is that I'm an ad ops marketing specialist in real life. That's my day job. I'm not going to say who, but I've been in the digital marketing and advertising space for a long time. So that's what my day job is, but it kind of goes hand in hand with media and content creation. It's all kind of blended in a large conglomeration of things. So anyway, as I've rambled on for about 14 minutes, thank you for listening to this podcast, watching this on the replay. I appreciate all of the friends and family that have said, hey, why aren't you podcasting? So hopefully I'll be getting back to doing more of this, as I've mentioned. And if you have a project or something that you're into, do the thing. This has been my thing for almost a decade. I've had ups and downs with it, but I'm happy that I'm not completely abandoning this podcast. And hopefully, if you listen, you feel the same way about whatever thing or project that you've been meaning to do or continue. So with further ado, I want to thank you again and see you next time on the next episode.